If you're learning to mix in your 40s or 50s, the context around your mixing is usually different. There's often less free time, more going on outside the studio, and a stronger need for whatever time you do have to really count. Progress can feel frustratingly slow, but it doesn't have to feel that way. And in this video, I'm going to share with you a straightforward 20 to 30 minute daily routine that can actually fit your life and helps you get the results you want. There's something most people don't talk about. As you get older, your taste improves faster than your confidence. You've listened to a lot of music. You've heard some great records. You know when something feels off. And that's a good thing, but it can also be frustrating because you're all too well aware of that gap between what you're hearing and what you're able to fix quickly. Add that to real life, work, family, other commitments, and this means that often mixing happens later in the evening or in shorter windows, and you don't want to spend half of that time just deciding where to start. This is why more tools or more techniques don't usually help at this stage. What helps is fewer decisions, clearer focus, and a way of practicing that just builds trust in your judgment. Before I show you the weekly structure, there's one rule that matters more than anything else. If you miss this, the rest won't really help. Every practice session has one intention only, just one. Pick one listening goal. Now, it could be balance, it could be depth, it could be the low end, it could be compression, it can be whatever you want it to be. It's about protecting your attention. Now, the moment I catch myself drifting or chasing some vague idea, and I think I'm, losing the plot, then I'll stop. And by doing that, I feel like I'm more in control and I'm working smarter. And in a way, this is very similar to meditation, not in a spiritual sense, but just in a practical one. You're choosing one thing to pay attention to, and when your mind wanders, you gently bring it back. And the practice helps you notice when you've wandered. Mixing sessions feel frustrating when your attention is split and it's just all over the place. This sounds almost too simple, which is why it's often overlooked, but this one rule fixes a lot of frustration. If I were starting again now, day one would always be balance. 20 to 30 minutes, no plugins or automation, just faders and panning. Balance is where you reconnect with the music before the technology tempts you away. I'd listen for what feels like the focus of the song, what supports that, the emotion it's trying to evoke, and what pulls my attention when something's too loud. At this stage of life, you probably know what matters. You just need space to hear it clearly. And just to say, this idea of starting with balance isn't accidental. It's actually the foundation of how I approach every mix, and it's something I go into in much more depth in the Static Mix mini course. And the reason I built that course is because balance is where most of the important decisions are really made, long before EQ or compression come into play. When you get the balance right early on, everything else becomes clearer. You stop fixing problems that don't actually exist. And you make decisions faster because the music already makes sense. So if this balance first approach clicks for you and you want a clearer step-by-step way to practice it properly, I'll leave a link in the description to the Static Mix mini course and you can check it out if you feel so inclined. But either way, the key point here is this. If you can hear balance clearly, you're already doing most of the hard work. This is where it can feel uncomfortable because it's not polished yet, but this is where your judgment starts getting sharper again. Day 2, I'd work on one problem only and I'd exaggerate it on purpose. Over-compress a vocal, push EQ too far, add far too much reverb. This serves to remind my ears what too much actually sounds like. This can help fix a problem you feel you seem to repeat over and over again in your mixes, but can't stop. When you've got limited time, exaggeration is efficient. It gets you to understand faster, so you can stop second guessing the normal settings. We're not trying to make it sound good here. We're teaching our ears where the guardrails are, the boundaries of what's too much and what's just right. If you've ever felt like you own plenty of tools but still feel unsure, this next part is usually what's missing. On day 3, I do no mixing at all. No DAW, no fixing stuff. I just listen to a couple of reference tracks at a consistent level. As your experience grows, referencing becomes more important, not less, because your expectations are higher than your memory. You know, we all have a pair of those rose-tinted glasses. During this practice session, I'd ask simple questions. What feels close? What feels further back? What's happening in that transition from the verse to the chorus? Now, this isn't copying, it's resetting your internal sense of what's normal. And this is a step that turns experience into confidence. And it's the one people skip because it doesn't feel productive. Day 4, I'd reopen the mix and apply one thing I learned that week. One thing. You're probably sensing a theme here. Maybe I'd balance it differently. Maybe I'd simplify the space. Maybe I'd change the panning around to see if it made the mix clearer. Confidence at this stage comes from making similar decisions and getting similar results. And the next part sounds obvious, which is exactly why most people don't really do it properly. Day 5, I'd print the mix or bounce it if that's your preference. And I'd listen later somewhere else. The car, on my phone, in the kitchen. Perspective matters, especially when you're close to something. I'd write down just 2 things, one thing that works and one thing that doesn't. And that reflection step is where some of the greatest gains are made. If finishing mixes is something you struggle with, this last part might feel uncomfortable. And that's usually a good sign. At the weekend, if you've got the time, I'd finish a mix. Even if it's not perfect, even if it annoys me slightly, finishing mixes trains judgment. Unfinished ones keep you circling the same decisions. At this stage, completion is the most important thing. All this works for us because it respects reality. Short sessions protect our ears and judgment. One intention removes overwhelm. Repetition builds trust in what you hear, and reflection turns experience into usable skill. Getting seriously good at mixing isn't about age, it's about clarity. And clarity comes from having a process that works with your life, not against it. If you like the sound of this approach, I've put 2 printable weekly practice checklists in the description. One for people just starting out and one for more experienced mixers. The reason to download them is to save you time, so you don't have to decide where to start every time you sit down. You can just follow the structure and focus on listening. If you're trying to get seriously good at mixing, especially when your time is limited, the last thing you need is getting stuck auditioning plugins and second guessing every choice. The video on screen now shows you how to narrow your options quickly, choose with intention, and move on without feeling like you might have picked the wrong thing. That's all from me. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.